Hello lovely listener, and welcome to the Aardvark Swift podcast. I'm James Bowers and I'm part of the marketing team here at Aardvark Swift. Throughout this series we'll be chatting to game studios, initiatives and industry professionals about all things video games, from tips on how to get into this line of work to studio cultures and projects to get involved in. This month our amazing guest host Abby Dickinson is back, speaking to Meg Daintith and Simon Barlow of the legendary developer Codemasters. They discuss their racing pedigree, the success of Grid, and how to stand out when applying for positions within video games.
For anyone who might be unfamiliar with Codemasters, could you explain a bit about the studio and what it is that you guys do best?
Whew, wow.
It's a big question.
Well, in a word, racing.
Yeah.
All about racing, really. It's not always been that way, I have to say. We've been on the block, 33 years now, I think. And we've had a tradition of previous other titles. So we've done a few variations. We've had things like Dizzy and Overlord and Brian Lara Cricket, quite a big sporting tradition. But yeah, we focused on the racing niche. Gosh, how many years ago, Si?
I think we've always done racing. I think back to I was here 20 yeyears ago, not continuously, but I was. This is my second term at Codemasters.
Wow, cool.
When I first started here, we were working on the Colin McRae games, so Rally, the TOCA Touring Cars games, things like that. So we've always had the racing heritage, but it's only really in maybe the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I guess, really, when we've doubled down on essentially trying to be the best in racing.
Do what you do best and do it the best.
And do it the best, yeah, exactly. We've got a reputation for having very kind of robust simulations, and we've always had a kind of reputation for very fun racing titles as well, which is something else we're branching into with Grid, which I'm sure we'll sort of talk about a little bit later as well. But yeah, it's working out very well for us.
Yeah, I suppose that's a brilliant thing about working for somewhere that's very specialised, is that you know exactly what you do best and you can just keep getting better and better and better at that. And so when you see a racing game coming out from Codemasters, you know it's going to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, definitely. And it's nice to have that kind of mark of quality, and you often see that in reviews and even previews as well of our latest titles. There's always that sense of, it's Codemasters, don't worry, it's going to have a certain kind of quality sort of bar associated with it. So that's really nice. There is pressure associated with that, because it does mean that there is a kind of preconceived idea of what a Codemasters racing game is. We do try and kind of subvert that from time to time as well. But trying to match up to those expectations is first and foremost the thing you have to do on any new title, right? And then you've got to look at how you can improve and how you can grow the business going forward. So yeah, it's exciting times.
Yeah, very exciting. Saying that the studio's been around for over 30 years.
Cody's has, I think it's 33 or something
33
now
this
on
year,
the clock, yeah. But I think even though, and you can tell by this building that we're in, Codemasters Towers, that, it's been around a long time and it's sort of iterated over the years, but it's very much a forward-looking place to be. Yeah. So when we talk, it's actually weird for us to talk about the sort of past, because it's just not part of the culture here to do that, really. It's genuinely, right, what's doing next? What milestone are we on? What needs to be done, So from that point of view, it's quite a progressive environment. And I think that's why we've sort of managed to stay where we have, just because we don't... It's like climbing a ladder, don't look down. Why would you? Why bother? Just keep going. So that's kind of the ethos, really. But yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I can just bugger off all the questions about talking about the past, and if you just want to talk about the past.
It's nice. It's always nice to talk about the good old days. I mean, I've not been here personally that long. I've known Codemasters like forever, but I've been here for a couple of years now. But I used to be an agency recruiter. So, it's quite a different world being on the development side of things, but really exciting, Yeah,
definitely. As Meg was saying before, just about how we're more forward-looking, I think, in the last certainly the last 4 or 5 years, definitely. Although we're working in one genre, which is racing, our ability to embrace sort of change within the industry, so things like certainly mobile development, and we have a big market for AAA experience on mobile, which is an area that very few developers work in. We bring our kind of console and PC experiences to mobile, which has been a big deal for us as well. We're looking into streaming technologies. We are partnering with Google for the Stadia platform. And so we are kind of taking those initiatives and trying to do what we can to move the genre forward, if you like, in those areas.
No, I think mobile's a really, really interesting one, especially at the moment, because you're all talking about those sort of the advent of like cloud gaming, Stadia, that sort of thing, and having that tech to be able to put AAA games onto mobile. Obviously, it's going to be very different with controls, but
it's not without
really interesting to look at.
That is very exciting, and it's not without its challenges. Controls is one thing, also interface is a big deal. Like, it makes you rethink the way, building games for something like the Switch. That Switch has got like a 6-inch screen, something like that, 5 or 6-inch screen. You can kind of look at that and think, do you know what? More or less, if I take a TV experience, a 10-foot UI, and turn it into a 2-foot UI for the Switch, it more or less works. Just about. You can't really scale that down to a phone screen. That's something very different. So some of the challenges that we have going forward is, well, okay, what do we do with our interfaces, particularly games like F1 and Dirt Rally, which are very information dense. They are detailed simulations, right? There's a lot of stuff on screen. How do you condense that, or how do you it's not just about increasing the size of the font or, the size of the UI. How do you actually make it physically work on a mobile screen? You might have to turn some things off, So those are the challenges that we're kind of currently looking at. How do we address those things? But we're seeing it as, it's potential growth for us as a business, but it's also exciting for us as game developers. And certainly for myself as a designer. I do this because I like challenge. And so if you give me a new hardware platform or you give me a new interface, great. Like that's a new challenge, right? And all designers will kind of just dive into that.
Yeah, that must be a brilliant culture to have, actually, to be able to have that sort of challenge and to go, right, how do we make it work on that? I've got a Switch. I have played a fair amount on it. I don't think there's any sort of like proper racing games for it, apart from the ones that you guys make, really.
Sure, yeah.
Because obviously you've got your Mario Karts and etc., but actual proper racing experiences, I think you guys might be the only ones that are making them.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we just,
Off the top of my head, that might be completely...
No, I can't think of any myself. I mean, we just released Grid Autosport for the Switch, which is, again, the game is a couple of years old in terms of when it was first released on console, but this is the first time that kind of game has really appeared on the Switch. And and you're absolutely right, like, we're the only people really doing that. And that's our niche, if you like. It's a pretty big niche. We see opportunity where maybe other people don't. And instead of us, like, lots of people have moved into mobile, but they'll make mobile-centric games. Whereas our mantra was, well, no, we're going to put what Codemasters do best, and we're going to give you, like, great vehicle simulation or vehicle handling on a mobile device, which nobody else has really touched. There are some pretty good mobile racing games, but not to really the extent that we're doing. And putting, F1 Mobile's done great for us. It's been a really successful title. And again, we are the only people really in that position to do things like that. So I think that's really positive.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's really exciting. So we're currently sat at the Southern office.
Yes.
Because obviously it's a podcast and people can't see it. You guys do have other offices around the country and around the world?
We do indeed, yeah. So in terms of UK, we actually have 3 studio locations, and they're all fairly big, actually. Southern's the largest in terms of headcount, and we have a couple of games under production here, at least at any one time. I think we've got maybe 280 people here, something like that. So it's a big operation. And we've also got the core business functions here, like, HR and finance and things like that. Then we've got the offering in Cheshire. People will know probably used to be a studio called Evolution, and does have a racing heritage of its own in a different sort of life, really. But it's been under the Codemasters wing now for 2.5 years, and Simon and I are actually both based up there. So it's very much Codemasters Cheshire, as we call it these days. So yeah, we are working on an unannounced title of them. I'd love to tell you, but I'd have to kill you. I think the head count at the moment is about 80 people, something like that.
Yeah, just south of 100, I think.
Yeah. Then we have Birmingham, and the Birmingham is probably best known for its Formula One, the official Formula One game. And so Ian and the team there have had that accolade for many, many years, and they really know their stuff. And it's amazing. We've just moved to a new studio there in Alpha Towers, which is right in the heart of the city. We've got 2 floors. It's been totally Codemasters decked out. It's gorgeous. I mean, even in the studio, you walk around a little racetrack on the floor.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's
cool. You don't get
it's very cool.
And there's like,
there's like track maps and stuff up on the walls, isn't there, for like the F1
circuits.
The
F1 ones around the world.
And TV showing F1 and, ticker tapes going on with what's happening in the game.
If you like F1, that's like... You just immerse yourself.
So yeah, we are kind of pretty spread out, I guess, really. And there's a lot of travel between studios for a lot of the people who work here, actually, because there's a lot of idea sharing, knowledge sharing, sort of brainstorming about tech and ideas and that kind of thing. So, I mean, not everyone who works here would experience that, but certainly, we do interconnect pretty well. Mm-hmm. So outside the UK, we've also got 2 more locations. We have a QA operation based in India. I'm reliably informed it's pronounced Pune.
Cool.
So I feel like an idiot somebody saying Poon for a decade.
As well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they kind of work overnight. I think the way that it works is that they're working and then they give our QA team. We have a huge QA team here of 80 people, and we're just ramping up actually now. So still hiring, folks. And so they get the sort of stuff to work on overnight, and then it passes back and forth over the globe between locations to keep the machine rolling.
Wow.
One of the efficiencies we've got there. And then finally we've got the Kuala Lumpur studio that does some art assets and props and supplies our art team here, and then we integrate them into the game here and into the engine. So yeah, pretty global, I would say.
Yeah, that is very global. I think that definitely qualifies.
Yeah.
So I know you're saying there's a good amount of communication between especially the UK ones and I suppose the other ones as well.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, so do you think that part of that's really important, that you're still kind of like knowledge sharing between them? Because obviously I know each one's going to be doing their own projects, but that you're still talking to each other, sharing ideas.
For sure. I mean, there's a couple of reasons why that's so important. One is that we're all still Codemasters, and one of our sort of key values actually is one Codemasters, and that is a really, really key proposition, because when, as Simon was saying before, when you buy a Codemasters game, you kind of know what you're getting, not necessarily the individual experience of that game, but you do know you're buying into a certain quality bar, and it's similar when you come and work for us as well. And then the other reason for it really is that when you have a niche that we do, it's very important to be able to diversify within that niche, otherwise everyone will get bored. And that's just not an option here.
But you start cannibalising your own properties then as well, which is kind of pointless, right?
And that kind of the absolute antithesis of what we're looking for. So, continually sort of iterating and improving, pushing the boundaries within, what the game is and does. We would never compromise that. But you have to have these enormously challenging areas of creativity to be able to produce the sort of depth of game that we're able to offer. And that's, I think, really why people come to work here and why they stay. So from that point of view, it is really, great that we've got more than one idea base, I think, in the country and globally. It just gives us a different perspective, really.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So do you find when people come to work for Codemasters, they do tend to stay? Obviously, you did leave for a small while, but then came back.
Yeah, I mean, that was like 20 years ago, so it's like
slightly different proposition.
Although, in fairness, I spent most of my career at what was Evolution Studios, which is now Codemasters. I was unfortunately made redundant from there as part of the reshuffle that Sony did. And I went away and did some other things for a while, and then got a call to come back after Codemasters essentially sort of formed a life raft for the people at that studio.
Yeah.
I wasn't part of that initial group, but they called me and said, look, we've got a job for you, would you like to come back? It's now working for Codemasters, And I jumped at it. We are one Codemasters. Each studio does have its own unique culture, also its own recruitment base as well, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
So that's something else that's beneficial in having like 3 studios across the country, is that we're not recruiting from the same talent pool all the time, which is really helpful. Particularly when you've got a number of projects all trying to staff up at once, which we've had, and you don't want to be competing for the same resources. It gives people an option then as well. Particularly, we've got a lot of staff from outside the UK. It gives them an option as well when they're kind of looking at, okay, well, what do I want to work on? Where do I want to live? Where do I want to be based? We can provide something that maybe other studios don't necessarily have if they've just got the one location. But as I was saying, each studio does have its own culture, and that's kind of part of the reason why I think people do stay, is that you become part of. I'm not going to say family because that's just the most cliched thing ever, and it's not that at all, right? Any of us that's worked with people for a long time, you see them more than your family, but it's not your family, right? We get that, but it feels like there's a good.
It's like a club, I think.
It is. There's a good camaraderie and there's a good spirit, isn't there?
We're all on the same team.
Very much so, yeah, and that really helps, I think, to kind of keep people on board. And there are people here that have been here for sort of 15, 20 years, and will continue to be here for another 15, 20 years. If the studio kind of carries on like that. So that says a lot, I think, really.
Yeah, it does say a lot. I think a lot with, especially in the games industry, it can be very nomadic, and it could be very
very
like,
much so,
you finish one project, you move on to something else, and people being in the same studio for 5, 10, 15 years can be almost completely unheard of.
Well, particularly if you're working in the same genre as well.
Yeah.
I think from people that maybe look externally and sort of think how you can work on racing games for 20 years. Well, you can. It's like working on how can you work on first-person shooters for 20 years, or open-world action games for 20 years. Like there is nuance and variety within that genre. Racing is as broad as those other genres, and part of the fun and also challenge comes in where you innovate and how you differentiate yourself. So I think that's another reason why people stick around, because it's like, well, maybe 50% of this job I already know because that's kind of similar to what I've done before, but then there's this whole other side of things that I don't know, and that's what gets me excited.
Our average tenure, I mean, we do have, of course, we have attrition. People are free to go. We don't nail them down.
Although I am thinking of changing that policy.
How much will it cost, Simon? Yeah, our average tenure, I believe, is over 5 years.
Wow.
So we do have some long service in the business, but I mean, I'm in recruitment, right? So I see both sides of that coin. I do a lot more growth recruitment than I do attrition recruitment, to a huge degree, in fact. And the whole sort of nomadic concept that you mentioned, you're right, that does tend to happen, and there is a bit of a roller coaster in the games industry of, you know, I'm touching wood here for everybody in a sort of smaller studio or an indie or whatever, because, you know, you've got to make great games, and if you don't, then, you know, the market will decide you've got to stop making those games and move on. But, you know, luckily for us, our teams are able to then perhaps even have a look at other teams. They come to the end of one project. I mean, Simon's a great example. He's actually moved projects during his tenure here, and he's not alone. We also recruit from within a lot. So I think actually our top, we do direct recruitment most, which is, you know, we're really proud of. So people come to us, we're very lucky that we've got a great name, and people are generous enough to want to come and work for us. But at the same time, I think it's our second highest source of candidates, actually internal. One of the biggest sort of feathers in our cap from that point of view is that we recruit internally, both for experienced level people, that's great, but also for people who are starting their career journeys in video games, because we love to look after people who want to work in the industry, because we were all there once, right? You know, everyone understands that level of ambition and that excitement and passion that graduates have when they come out, and that's really important that we keep that flame burning, because, you know, it can be quite a tough life and you have to work pretty hard, but, you know, keeping that alive is really important. So we very often recruit from our pool of QA technicians who come in once a year. We ramp up those up, as I say, up to about 80, sometimes up to about 100 people. And it is the first place that we will look if we've got a role that we can actually then say, right, okay, who can we fit in? How can we find a role for someone who can learn on the job and who's understood a little bit about the industry from their introduction, but how can we feed that and give them some more to work on? So that's really where we're coming from with that.
I suppose just kind of build on that a little bit. What should people expect when they walk in the door?
It does depend on the studio.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of goes back to what I was saying before. There is a sense of what Codemasters is and what it represents. And we do have very kind of consistent sort of company values that everybody across the 5 studios is expected to kind of adhere to, or at least acknowledge. But we are conscious of the fact that every studio, particularly for the ones in Cheshire and Birmingham, were essentially independent or formerly independent studios in their own right, already come pre-packaged with its own culture, right? And so it's part of integrating that into what Codemasters means overall, but also retaining what they have, because there's a reason why these studios were either acquired or merged. It's because there's some value there that we wanted as a business. And we don't want to destroy that either. So, yeah, it does depend on the studio. I think what you can find is, I think all of the studios are pretty welcoming. They're a pretty friendly place to be. There's not a huge amount of... There is pressure, but it's the right kind of pressure. It's not an aggressive company. You know, I have worked for some places, and I've heard from colleagues at other studios that have maybe had those kind of more aggressive, harder deadlines. You know, we have deadlines that we have to adhere to. We are an independent company, and so, you know, our former games pay for the next ones. But it never feels like that kind of sword of Damocles is hanging over your head. Whereas maybe at like a larger publisher, for example, you might feel that sometimes. So you don't have that pressure here. The pressure really is to innovate, to perform, absolutely, but to show something different and to grow our franchise and grow our business kind of year on year. And that's a different kind of pressure. That's the right kind of pressure. I want the company to grow. I want the company to be successful, because if the company's successful from a purely selfish point of view, I'm successful too, right?
Yes,
and vice versa. So we can innovate if we can grow our titles, and we have, over the past sort of 5 years, increase the budget of every title moving forwards, right? By incremental amounts every time. And that is absolutely, Frank Sanier, the CEO, that's absolutely his goal, is to make the right bets, ultimately, and where to put the budget. But he wants to grow it. He wants to, you know, grow into mobile, grow into streaming, grow into esports. Like, that's what this company is about. So as far as the general culture goes, that's really what you can expect. If you want to be part of a forward-thinking operation, and you want that level, you know, you can work with pressure, but it's the right kind of pressure.
It's worth mentioning as well that that's a very true, in particular in Southern, where you genuinely see Frank in the canteen. He's just a very, very affable individual, and it's really refreshing, actually. There's just no barriers in that way.
Well, you'll see all the execs in the canteen. If they come down for their lunch, they'll just sit at a table eating their lunch with the rest of the staff. It's not like they go away back to their secret, like, 5-star, like, you know, they eat in the canteen with everybody else. And if you, like Meg said, if you want to talk to them, just go and talk to them.
So that sort of vision, you definitely feel that, and you get that much more. I mean, they do visit the other studios, of course they do, but just from practical terms, they literally work based from here, right? So this is where the exec team are fundamentally based. And then the other 2 areas are Very, very different. I mean, the culture in Southam, you've probably got a few ingredients mixing in. So, yes, you've got the leadership here that's very visible. You've got some tradition here because you can, it's a very beautiful site. We've got 10 acres or something, I don't know.
Isn't it?
Crazy amounts of
It's
a beautiful old farm. So we have this lovely building.
Yeah, there's a lake at the back that you can go for a walk
exactly.
around at lunchtime and stuff like that.
We've got our own gym. We know we're in the middle of... people say you're in the middle of nowhere. It's like, yeah, we are, but it's dead nice. So, I love a walk of lunchtime, even in the rain.
Not only 15 minutes from Lamb.
Yeah,
it's not like the middle of nowhere. It's like, come on, people, right?
There's a Tesco half a mile away.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not seeing Bear Grylls camping anywhere locally. But but we do respect that people want a bit of a life if they're going to be here for the day. And they can't pop to Lemon in their lunch hour. Fair enough. We've got a gym and we've got a really nice. We've got breakout areas.
We've got a pub. We've got an on-site pub.
We have got a pub.
Really?
Yeah, because why not?
Yeah,
that's
a very good point.
Yeah, exactly.
We need a pub in every studio now, and that would be nice. But
I have
it's a work in progress. The Birmingham studio is very different again. I mean, it just absolutely exudes F1 there, the whole building. So from that perspective, when you come here, you don't necessarily get a single title. You get Codemasters, whereas certainly in Birmingham it's absolutely Formula One, and it's a really beautiful studio. It's very, very high tech.
It's like city centre location, so it's like if that's the life that you want.
Shiny, but it's also quite a studious environment. Of the sort of 100 people who work there, I think 60 of them are programmers.
Wow.
I know, right? So it's a real tech hub. They make their own engine for that particular game, for example. There's an element to which serious is probably the wrong word, but they're focused, right? And you do feel that level of quality and focus when you're there. Cheshire is totally different again.
It's like the opposite.
I mean, yeah. I won't say that we're slick and polished, but we are northern. It's friendly, and the games that we produce there, and they're going to produce there, watch this space, are a reflection of that culture. Definitely, it's high energy, it's fun, it's engaging, it's friendly, it's proud, but doesn't allow any airs and graces either. You know what it's like.
Well, it's a completely open plan office, which I think means that you can't necessarily have that. If you want quiet time, you put your headphones on. That's generally the way. Like we had one of the licensing team came up for the first time last week, and she sat next to me on the spare desk next to me, and said, like, I just want to point out like what a really nice vibe there is in this studio. Like it's just just a nice buzz, a nice hum around the office. I was like, you mean we're chatty? And she was like, well, yeah, but in a good way, And that's kind of that's the way it is in that studio. We're very open. Rob Karp, who's the dev director of the studio, spends 90% of his day just walking around the office, talking to people. And just checking in with
getting
them.
his steps up.
Getting his steps So I knew there was an ulterior motive. Yeah. But you can do that with an open plan studio. You can do that. You can just wander around and just see what's going on. And I'll often get called over to people's desks by like the art director will say, "Hey, Si, can you come and check this out? Look at this awesome thing that like this person has produced." And that's a really nice feeling because it's very collaborative in that respect.
Do you know what? You really feel the collaboration there, actually, in particular because of the way that the office is shaped and whether they've designed everybody sits. It's quite deliberate. It's like, okay, well, we need art there, and then we need design there, and then we need the programmers here, and they will literally plan the floor so that they can have that ease of transaction and an idea showing between the two.
And we'll move it during the project as well. That's been part of. If different phases of the project demand different collaboration, so we'll go, okay, right, we can reconfigure the office a little bit here, and it takes like an afternoon for everybody to move desks, and then we've got a slightly different makeup then for a particular phase of the project. And that is just one of the advantages of having just a big open plan space, really.
And a big company, because we all our own IT, right? We don't outsource anything, so we do everything. So if you need a change to the website, right, well, we'll do that. If you need a change to your desk or to your equipment, or you need an upgrade on your mailer or whatever it is, we'll do that. Everything's done here as it's needed, really. And the toolbox that we've got is really incredible. And I've worked for big and small companies, and sometimes when you're relying on other suppliers it can be tricky, but that is a nice thing about working here as well.
Very much so.
Yeah, just being able to stand up and walk over to the person that you need an answer from is always nice to be able to do.
Hi, Paul. Just be nice to Paul.
Okay, so I know we kind of touched a little bit on the niche and how you guys are working in racing, and obviously you're doing a similar sort of game all the time, but people could say that could be a little bit samey. We've already touched on how that isn't, because obviously for example, like Grid's a completely different game to F1.
Yeah.
So how do you think people make sure they don't get bored when they're working on the same sort of thing all the time? Or is it not boring at all? Explain.
Well, do you know what? As you've mentioned there, I'm just going to jump in with my real layman's thing before Simon talks about the actual games. But when I first got here, I thought racing is racing, and it's really not. Because the diversity, I mean, like you've just said, at one end you've got much more simulation type games, actually. So Formula One, it's kind of scientific, and it genuinely is. There's a lot of AI involved, etc. And then you've got Dirt Rally 2. Again, for an absolute purist, it's just an absolute joy. We've got John, who is our consultant, he used to be a pro driver, and he now works for us full time. He will sit on the D-box and tell you whether or not this is driving like a rally car does, and whether the mud splatters are working and that kind of thing. So the level of realism and simulation, and frankly, it's really hard. And I kill all the spectators every time I play. I go the wrong way. I'm brilliant. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got the much more accessible and fun elements, in my experience anyway, just because it's my taste, but on the Grid side of things, and obviously new titles in the pipeline. So yeah, I think the range really surprised me. So racing is not one thing. That's definitely something to say.
For sure. I sort of feel like it's a bit of a disingenuous thing when people look at racing and go, oh, they're all the same games, because nobody says that about any other genre. I wonder whether it's something to do with kind of the size of the audience, because like the FPS audience is 10 times what the racing audience is, like just because I guess people like shooting rather than driving cars, which says a lot about society.
Yes,
but there's a sense that because those games have a wider audience, there's I guess a greater understanding, and there's at least a greater appreciation of the nuance between them. That exists in all genres. Like, just because people don't necessarily see that in racing doesn't mean it isn't there. It absolutely is there. In terms of your original question about how do you not make it boring, or how do you kind of stave off the boredom, well, it's like any job, I guess. You find ways to innovate, you find ways to challenge yourself. Everybody has a different threshold, everybody has different buttons that you can push that they want to do to get them out of bed in the morning, things like that.
The way you described it to me was new ways of solving old
problems. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it is for me. That's what it is for most designers, probably most programmers as well. Mm-hmm. Artists might be slightly different. For an artist, it's probably more about the overall vision, the creative vision behind it. If I'm making a game, like Meg said, like F1 or Dirt Rally, where I am trying to recreate real life, the challenge and the passion comes from how do I get it closer? Because we're kind of 90% there, and that last 10% is going to take us like 2 decades, right? Like trying to accurately we're getting there with ray tracing now to be able to create more realistic and lifelike lighting effects, amongst other things. Yeah. But that's where you get the challenge. It doesn't really matter what genre you're working in at that level. It's you find an element to latch onto and you innovate within that area.
Yeah, so you're looking at the minutiae of it and seeing how you can make it more and more realistic. And with new technology that's coming out all the time.
Absolutely.
We know how it works.
Well, we push our own tech, and that's a key point about Code and that's another reason why we are an employer of choice, thankfully, for people in the programming sort of discipline, because we create our own innovation on our own tech, and obviously we're really secretive about it, and we don't even discuss it necessarily with people at interview stage, but once they're here and they're sort of behind the curtain, they will start to understand just exactly how our complex picture gets put together, and that will innovate and push and drive, not just for the games that we've got on offer now, but as Simon was saying earlier, the cross-platform, the next gen, etc., and moving those things forward all the time, constantly iterating, constantly having a deeper and richer experience, and just pushing those boundaries all the time, which is always tech-enabled, and we're very proud of that. We're called Code Masters, do you know what I mean? We're not called car masters, it is about, it's all great having a car, but it's got to move, and the tech enablement is really the heart and soul of this place, I would say, and it facilitates just the beauty of everything else and that gameplay experience that we like to offer.
What do you think is the best thing about working at Codemasters?
There's a really easy answer for me, actually. It's the people. There's a reason why I came back to that studio, having been away for a couple of years. I've kind of built this team almost from scratch. So I kind of have a design team that I lead at the moment, which had like 1 or 2 people that worked on the previous title, but the rest of it was completely new. Being able to employ the right people, or what I believe is the right people, for not just their skill set but also their personality, and we've done that across the board because we've grown for this project. So we've seen it on the code team and we've seen it on the art team as well. Looking at a particular skill set or a particular personality type that fits that works well together, that complements each other. And seeing that flourish and seeing that grow. You got those weird, like, proud moments where you kind of sit back and you see, like, I employed a kind of an entry-level designer that literally, like, the first week is just kind of up off her desk, kind of going around chatting to people and making new connections and, like, just solving problems and stuff. And I'm like, this is great. Like, this is...
Proud.
Yeah, because it's... But that's what, for me, that's what it's about. I want people to integrate. I want people to talk. I want people to improve, and you only improve, I think, by bouncing ideas around and learning from other people. So for me, that is like, every day's a school day, right? That's what gets me out of bed every morning. And it might not always be a conversation about the game we're making. It might be a conversation about a film that we've seen, or an album that we've listened to, or a comic we've read. But you're always learning, and those conversations are always, more or less, always very interesting. And you can find ways of improving your work, I think, through having those conversations as well. They're all tangentially related. So absolutely, that's like the people and the kind of journeys that they go on, hands down. So that was a bit like...
I'm a bit choked now, I know.
All about the love
moment
here.
there.
You say something really superficial now, like the coffee's nice.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, exactly, yeah. Coffee's dead good.
Coffee's alright, actually, in fairness. It's pretty good.
I mean, I come at things from a different angle because I don't physically make games. I'm not as clever as that. But yeah, I mean, I'm in a people business, right? So I've been in recruitment since 1996. So it is, yes, it's definitely about people. But specifically working here now, I used to be an agency recruiter in the games industry, because the games industry is always going to need agencies, I think. I think that's perfectly fair and reasonable. It's really hard finding good people. There's nothing wrong with it. But what I really, really enjoy is the fact that I now work for somewhere that we make the games. And I'm just like, I feel the level of pride that Simon's got in his team, I feel like that, like about Grid coming out, like, you know, F1 shipped 2 months earlier than it did last year, this year. It's like, well done. And it's like, and, you know, and the new titles that are in development that I've seen and, you know, been privileged enough to have a look at, and it's hugely exciting. Just that creative output, I absolutely love it, and feeling like I'm part of the team. I'm helping bring in other people in the team who can start to make it as well. It's just contributing to that product. That is really what I absolutely love about it. That is what winds my watch here, definitely.
Great phrase.
Winds my watch, I love that.
I said light my ring to somebody the other day and they didn't know what I was talking about. And I was like, you never had a gas cooker? And they were like, I thought it was something sexual. I'm like, no, it's about cooking on gas. You light it lights my ring. Like, what is wrong with you people? So yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. I love that. Just kind of going like, why are you talking to me about this? Oh my god, that's brilliant. Oh, it must be so good though to be able to see, like, to kind of immerse yourself in it and seeing all that creative stuff. Because obviously from an agency point of view, you're obviously talking to people about their projects, and I get to do fun things like this.
And a variety of as well, you know, which is nice, isn't it? And, you know, you do get a great view of the games industry from being in an agency, there's no question. And it's a really, really good place to be a recruiter. There's no, you know, I'm not arguing against that at all. It's but for me personally, I've always been very interested in the creative industries, specifically, well, film actually. I'm a really big film fan. You know, I won't class myself as a gamer, but I love the games because I love the work that goes into them. I love how beautiful they look. I love the joy they bring to people and the memories they bring to people, and just that this sort of symbolic collaboration that a game is. You know, one person doing one thing is great, but a whole team making a game over 2 years is effing fantastic, you know, and that is what I love. It's just, just the longevity of that and how committed people are, and the pride in that getting on the shelves, and love it.
I love that. You've all got really cute answers. It's really nice.
We are cute.
We don't actually believe any of this, by the way. This is just purely for the podcast.
Have we finished?
Oh.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I must go now and be myself.
No, I'll shoot some grouse in a minute.
Well, we are in the right place.
That's right, absolutely.
When you're looking for people to join Codemasters, what sort of things are you looking for? Is probably more recruitment side, possibly?
Ooh, yes and no. I mean, because we work really closely with the hiring managers, actually. So Simon and I have worked together many times in hiring. And what do we look for? So it's ingredients of people rather than a certain type of person, if that makes sense. And that's a key point for me, because we're really keen on enhancing diversity here as well. All manner of diversity, of course. I am quite involved in the G Into Gaming initiative. I used to work closely with Liz Prince of Amicus, who has done a fantastic job in setting up that initiative. Obviously, we've got Women in Games and BAME in Games, other sort of things that are now rising up as they should be. So all types of diversity is really important. And I think one of the key things in recruitment there is that you're not looking for somebody who fits a type or a mould or a picture of what you think is going to work. Actually, you're looking for the ingredients of what they've got. Do they bring the passion? Do they bring an out-of-the-box mindset? Do they bring a level of energy and commitment and enthusiasm? Are they looking to improve all the time? Are they self-aware? Do they want to self-improve? Not just necessarily build a career like up to the top of the tree. They might be really happy what they're doing. That's great. As long as they want to keep doing it well, that's what we're interested in. So it's those qualities that we try to unpick. Obviously, when you're looking at a CV, it's quite difficult to get those things. So we do a really high number of Skype and phone, actually. That's pretty much always our first port of call, isn't it? The reason we do that is we're not screening out or something hideous. This is actually about doing more calls, talking to more people, because it takes slightly less time to do a call than it does to do a face-to-face. Probably about half the time, realistically. So you can get more in. So we're really interested to see and hear the market and understand what ideas people are bringing to us and what different types of characters and traits people can bring to us. So yeah, that's the reason why we put that up front. And then, of course, the face-to-face interview is really important. We do test people. Depends on what kind of role you're going for.
Yeah, mostly on the programming side, possibly a bit on the outside as well. I mean, design's very difficult to test, other than just asking people questions and trying to find out a bit more about them.
Yeah, exactly.
Just I guess following on from what Meg said, like from my point of view, obviously I've only recruited designers because that's the area that I work in. And what I'm specifically looking for above and beyond anything else really is insight. And what I mean by that is I'm going to make the assumption that from somebody's CV, I'm going to assume that you can do all of the things that you say you can do, right, on your CV. I'm going to take you at face value on that, which means that I know the hard skills that you possess. What I don't really have any indication of at this point is the soft skills. So part of like Mag was saying, we do a lot of Skype and phone calls depending on where people are based. I mean, if they're local, we'll just get them in for a face-to-face if it's easy enough, but that's not always the case. As I said before, we have a lot of international applicants. And so that's, for me personally, is an opportunity to find out about somebody's soft skills. Like, what do you like to talk to? How does your mind work? How do you think? Do you know what questions to ask? Do you know that there are even questions to ask? Because that's not always the case. And I've interviewed people that have got a fantastic academic record. Straight out of university, they've got a first for their degree. They've got high grades in every post-education that they've done. They've got a master's degree and all the rest of it. But they're not designers. And there's a different skill set around whether, being able to tick the boxes in order to kind of succeed in academia is not always the same as being able to apply yourself in a real world environment. And that is really hard to get unless you talk to somebody. I look at somebody's CV that does all those things and I think, wow, this is a great candidate. It doesn't always happen, but I have had a few examples of that where I've spoken to them and gone, actually, you don't really think like a designer. You might be great in a different discipline in the industry, but that's not really the way your mind works. And I can't get that unless I talk to you.
Yeah, it's like an abundance mindset kind of thing, because we expect people to come here and contribute to, to making us better, solving the problems, that come up and whatnot.
I'll give you a recent example, actually, that just to touch on something you said then, Meg, about making us better. I recently employed somebody in an entry design position, and there were 3 candidates that were more or less at the same level in terms of their ability, in terms of their kind of achievements, their hard skills, let's say. And they were all really nice people, they all had really good soft skills. But one of them in particular stood out, and having spoken to the other people on my team that interviewed them, we came to the conclusion that they would make us better. The other 2 could do the job, but only this one person would actually, let's say in 2 years' time, would have improved us as a department. That's a very different thing. So when it comes down to it, that's what you're looking for. That's what I'm looking for anyways, the person that can make a difference. And it's a shame for the people that are competent enough to do the job, but because of people want to work here, which is great from our point of view. It keeps Meg really busy, but it does mean that we get a lot of applicants. Yeah. And so how do you stand out? Well, you have to offer something slightly different, or you have to fit within a slightly different role within the team. And that's why, for me, it's about finding out how you fit from a personality point of view, not necessarily just from a work point of view.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about getting new people in is you can get that sort of fresh perspective,
totally.
Innovation, excitement, I suppose, and when you want people to come in, you want them to give you those sort of plus points, because if you're in a company for a while, you can get a little bit bogged down in knowing what you can and can't do, whereas I think when new people come in, they don't have those preconceived.
No, but they also challenge you as well. Like I said before, I've been doing this for 2 decades now. I am still learning, and I am still being challenged. And I put the same person the first sort of week they'd started. We have a robust kind of peer feedback system within the design team. And so anytime anybody comes up with a design, the first round of feedback comes from the designers themselves, and it can be quite brutal at times, right? But we want that because it teases out the problems and creates a more robust design. And so I sent one of my designs out for review, and this designer got back to me and said, I'm not sure I should be commenting on this. You're the lead designer. Why do you really want my opinion? I was like, 100% I want your opinion. Like, I'm going to get it wrong. Like, just because I'm in this position doesn't mean I'm 100% right all of the time. Of course not. That's ludicrous. Everybody's opinion is valued, and I want people to challenge me and challenge each other. Otherwise, we don't get better.
Very true.
So
no, it's good. It's good that you kind of encourage that as well, that you make sure that people are always challenging you, no matter what part of the structure that you're at. I think that it's great to have that sort of, to be able to look at the lead and just kind of go, actually, this bit shit, can you change it?
Yes, very much so. I reserve the right to go, you're wrong.
Yeah, but, that's what you get from being a lead.
That's right.
But you still encourage
they can still say it, exactly.
On the programming side, we do again use Skypes and telephones. We generally, if you're sort of experienced or you're a graduate up to a certain level, we probably give a test out. Yep. We have a couple of different tests that we use, but both are pretty open and loose, and we just want to see what your problem solving methods are as much as anything else. And they're pretty much all based around C++, because we do use C# in the business for tools and whatnot, but in terms of our game development, it is very, very C++ focused. For good reason. Lots and lots of graduates will come out and they've got C# and Unity, and that is great. There is absolutely, they're good, there's jobs in games, no question, with that skill set, no question at all. But for us, we need the C++ focus, so that is something we do test up front. But again, and one of the reasons we do that is to see where people will fit most naturally within the programming teams that we've got, because they are so diverse and they've got so many options and so many choices here as a programmer. So we want to have a look at what people's strengths are and then talk to them about what they want and then what we need, and we try and get those 3 things to fit. So starting with a test is the most sensible way to do that, and then moving on to a Skype. No,
that's good. Gives a bit of insight on what people to expect if they're going to be applying it. That's good. Do you have a graduate programme specifically, or do you just hire graduates in a similar way to hire everyone else?
So our graduate intake is regular, so we do have graduates that come and work for us each year. We definitely have graduates, but we haven't had a formal graduate programme as such. I'd actually like that in the not too distant future. It's one of the sort of longer term projects that I'm working on. We're starting with internships, which we are now building into our recruitment year as a separate area. Normally the development teams come to the DFO with a budget and say, I need this many people and this is how much it'll cost, and after a very big argument, we agree a list of people and skills and what that's going to cost us. In addition to that, we've now got the interns that don't form part of that budget picture. That's quite a big move for us because it's an area of pure speculation, if you like, but it's reinvestment into the grassroots of the industry. And we believe that actually, the skill shortages that everybody knows that we've got in the industry right now, we have to address them, and you've got to be proactive. And a great way of doing that is to hire on an internship basis. So we are doing that this year. We've already got one graphics programmer actually up in Cheshire. On the internships in particular, it gives us the opportunity to hire both nationally and internationally. So we do reach out to UK and European universities to do that, and we're in the middle of doing that. We were at How West last week in Belgium and HTV.
I've been to Breda.
Yes.
I've been to Stafford a bunch of times as well. We have relationships
very close
with
to Staff Uni up the road here. Yeah, we are very active, and I'm continuing to do that work. So we're filling those shoes. So yeah, I think give me 3 years, then maybe we'll have a graduate programme, as it were.
I still think the internship programme's a really good idea though, because everyone's always talking about how universities can't give you the exact right schools.
We need to bridge. Everyone knows, we need to bridge universities and studios, there's no question. And some of the universities are closer to what we need than others and what they're producing in terms of their student output, if you like.
It's still a really, really good idea. Even if there's no like specific graduate programme now. I presume you still have graduates coming in.
Oh, we do, yeah.
There's no specific programme for it.
Correct.
Yes.
So wherever, and it depends where we are in the project, okay? So up in Cheshire, we've had a bit more luxury because we're further away from the release date than some of our other titles being developed. So for that reason, we've got, different stages of the project allow you to have people who don't necessarily have to hit the ground running from day one. We're not shipping next week or whatever it is, So yeah, from that point of view, it tends to be a few sort of, we might have 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 there, 2 or 3 in the third studio. So across all of our 3 studios, we do hire, and it includes all of the disciplines as well. So art is probably the area where we get most graduates coming through, I would think. Then designers and programmers are probably equal second. Yeah, and then we do have some people coming into production, actually, if they're interested enough in the industry and they've done, some similar work and perhaps done some volunteering, or they've shown willing, then we will look at all types of people for sort of an assistant production type role.
So how do they fit into the teams? Do they have like a mentorship programme? Do they have like a buddy system?
It depends on the team, really, I think.
Yeah,
depends on the team.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not formal.
So yeah, it's more informal. I think the code team at Cheshire definitely has a buddy sort of system where people are kind of buddied up with another programmer. On the design team, it's more informal than that, but we do tend to pair off the designers, or we at least have the newer designer working with somebody else on a feature, at least for that initial phase, just until they get their feet under the table a little bit. It depends on the level of experience. Yeah. We employed an experienced designer not that long ago, and he's just come in and hit the ground running on a feature because he's got that level of experience. Anybody that is a graduate or has a few years of experience will probably end up just partnering them up with somebody. But there is nothing formalised really. It just depends on exactly what the nature of the role is, who they are, who's available, and what work they're working on as well, because it might not always work out.
Yeah, so you've got that flexibility.
We've got that flexibility. I mean, ultimately, it falls on the lead's shoulders to mentor them. So, like, my job is to check in and make sure everybody's okay. I'm not necessarily, like, day-to-day checking on everybody's work. I expect... if I've partnered up an entry designer with more experienced designer, they'll kind of be working collaboratively for, a couple of days, and I'll check in maybe every other day and just make sure things are okay, or I'll just ask them to present their work back to me, and we'll kind of take it from there. But I'm the kind of the stopgap, if you like your lead is supposed to be the person that's oversees everything rather than looking at the minutiae of it.
Yeah. Grid's just come out. It's got really good reviews as well. I was reading.
It's doing good. Yeah.
Yeah. So happy?
Yes, I am actually. Yeah. I'm in a really interesting position because I've not been on the project since the end of May. I think Meg alluded to it before. I moved on to another project earlier this year, so I've not seen the game finish. Which was weird. I worked on it for like 2.5 years and then wasn't there for like the last sort of few months of it, which was a really odd feeling. So I've kind of looked at it from a distance, although I have done some press events for them as a result of it, which was like, I need to just brush up my grid knowledge again now because I've been in a different world for 3 or 4 months. I am pleased. It was a really interesting project for a number of reasons, because of where the IP was at. Like, we hadn't really done a grid game for a while. Also because of, I think there was certainly amongst the fan community, there was a surge towards the earlier grids. I think Grid 1, and to a certain extent Grid 2, but certainly Grid 1 is really held in high esteem by people. And that's been like 12 years, 13 years, something like that. So for us, it was like, okay, where do we go with this title now? If we're going to try and dial back to that, like, we can't really make that game again. A, because it's boring, and B, because it just doesn't fit in the market anymore. So what does that look like today? And also because we essentially had to build the team from scratch. Like, I was employee number 1 on the project, which was just, interesting to try and come up with, because I was doing the pitch for it as well as doing the project plan for it, and as well as doing the recruitment for it, and it was just a lot. But it was really, But what was nice is when I kind of more people came on board, I could kind of disseminate the stuff. But it meant that, like, for those first few months, I was like some kind of like Machiavellian villain, just like in control of like everything.
It's like, this is mine.
Yeah, my domain. So I've been in a really interesting position of kind of starting the project off. And then my role kind of changed. I was originally like on a contract. And so when I was employed full-time, we had a much bigger team. And I actually took the odd decision. I decided not to take the director role. I decided to give that to somebody else and take a designer role. Because I felt that I'd worked through it from the ideation phase and pitching it and all that kind of thing, to the point where I was like, I actually just want to make this game now. I'm not sure I want to be the person that kind of spins all those plates and looks after everything and deals with kind of like publishing and marketing and the exec board and stuff. I actually just want to make the game because I really want to make this now. So I made the decision to actually take a step down and continue on as a designer, and we got a different game director in. So I've seen it from both sides, really, and it has been a really fascinating project to work on. I am really pleased with where it's ended up. It's been challenging in some cases, I'm not going to lie. partly because of how long it's been since we've really touched that IP properly. Like Autosport was a great game, but it didn't really feel like a mainstream Grid title, if you like. And so that presented some challenges because there was a lot of questions on what does Grid mean to people these days. Also, the market has changed a lot. Forza Horizon has just swallowed everything whole. Need for Speed is kind of off the pace a little bit. So we were coming out at a very interesting time, I think, for the kind of the arcade or simcade racer. But people seem to get it. That's the main thing. People get what we're trying to achieve with it. I've seen a lot of really positive comments about how it does feel like a true spiritual successor to the original Grid, which is exactly where we wanted it to be. So I'm glad that people get that, and we were able to execute on that. There's a bunch of ideas I had at the start of the project that never made it to fruition, so you're always going to have that, like, if only we'd have got that. I have that for every project I've worked on, right? That's just the way it is. But I think in this stage, because I was literally the person right at the start of it, there's more of a kind of a personal attachment there, I think. It has been really nice, actually, for the last few months to not actually be involved and just look at it as a fan and as a player.
Yeah.
I
suppose that's the point of view you're looking at it when you kind of didn't want to do the director role, you wanted to make it. You're like, no, I actually want to be...
I want to make this game,
It's like, it would be great to be here and be the Machiavellian overlord for the entire time. But it's just...
It has its perks.
Yeah, it's like, I want to do the cool shit on the side.
Yeah, totally. And that was a really unique position. I've never been in that position before. Previous employers, I've moved projects and taken a step down on that project just because they needed an extra pair of hands. But this was the first time where I was offered a director role full time and went, no, I don't want it, thanks. Oddly enough, on the project I'm doing now, I am acting as the director of it again. So hey, we've come full circle.
Falls into that role eventually.
That seems to be what's happening. I'm holding back from taking it.
Is futile.
Yeah. That seems to be the case. I'm slowly being squeezed into it, so there's no other option but for me to accept it. But anyway, it's doing really well. I think time will tell where it kind of settles in terms of the overall kind of series. For me, I genuinely do believe it is a great kind of spiritual successor to the original Grid. I hope that bears out sort of longer term.
Yeah, that'd be excellent. So you're always talking, obviously, earlier about innovation, about things to push forward on each game. What do you think's like the biggest innovation or the biggest new thing for this Grid in terms of the older Grids, in terms of other games you guys make?
So the one thing I wanted to really draw out from this right at the start was the racing action. We realised at Codemasters what we do better than anybody else is the on-track experience. And that was an idea that was massively, like the Chris Smith, the game director on the project at the moment, he's a fantastic guy. And that was one of the areas that he just grabbed and went, yes, like that's what we're going to run with. That's what we're going to make the big thing about it. It plays like no other racing game. The on-track experience is so dramatic, let's say, that it feels like real racing. Like a lot of racing games tend to be like processional. They're really... I'm not going to say dull because I like those games too, but they don't pay enough attention to the race. They simulate the cars really well. They have really accurate tracks and they go, the race, whatever. Like they always seem to forget that a race is about the human beings behind the cars. And so we thought, well, how do we capture that experience? How do we get the on-track rivalries, the on-track drama in a racing title? And we doubled down on that. And again, I'm really pleased that people are picking up on it. The idea behind the Nemesis system was just such a great idea. Not my idea, so I'm not going to take credit for that. That was somebody else's idea. Fantastic idea, where the more kind of drama, let's say, you have with other drivers, they can start to become more aggressive towards you, or even more passive in some cases, where they'll just back off and give you space. But it creates more personal drama within the race that you don't normally get in other racing titles. It adds more personality to it. So for me, that's a real key innovation. And anybody that picks it up and plays it will immediately see and feel how different it is to any other racing game, really.
It's our version of narrative, really, the role of the driver, because that's the role that you play. So that's, if you're not watching a story, but you are feeling that story while you drive it.
No, I completely agree. I was about to say that Nemesis system sounds exactly like you are creating your own
You
story.
are the best, like for these sort of games, it's like sports games as well, right? The best stories are the ones you tell yourselves. The experience of playing a game and you talk about it with your friends afterwards, you go, oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened last night. That's the kind of experience you get from playing this. And it's not always the case in racing titles. We thought that there was a gap for that. We thought that there was an area for us to innovate, which does back to what we were talking about at the start of this conversation, really, about where do you innovate in racing? Well, that was where we innovated on Grid. And we will probably continue to push on with that as well, because it was a great experience for us, and we're really pleased with where it's ended up, but we've got so many other ideas for it. Yeah. Where else can we take it now?
I really like the idea of Nemesis systems. I remember... Was it Shadow of War?
Shadow of Mordor, yeah.
Shadow of Mordor, the first one that did it. I just remember there was this one orc that kept coming and killing me, and I hated him. His name was Arthur the Puny, and I still remember this. Because I'm still annoyed. You turn up exactly when I was just about to die, and I used to just go, you're back again. Oh, boy, be like, it's Arthur, innit?
Well, you'll get so maybe play Grid and relive those moments.
Relive that beautiful frustration.
Happy days.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it gives that that replayability as well.
Does.
Because you'll be there going, I'm going to beat that bellend.
And it's personal to you, because you might not, like, we can, like, all three of us can play through the career and we'll have completely different experiences of that. They may be the same races, but they will never play out the same way.
When you set out to make this game, I know you're saying it's kind of turned out as a spiritual successor. Was that what you were looking to do? Was it supposed to be like a straight reboot, or is it just kind of like morphed into something else?
Initially, I don't want to say we didn't know what we were going to make. That's disingenuous. But it was more a case of it could have been a few different things, let's say. So those initial meetings that I had with the executive team were quite organic, really, because we were exploring what we wanted Grid to be, because Grid's been a number of different things. All three of those Grid games are very different to each other. So we had a lot of things to draw upon, a lot of options for us, and it was more a case of narrowing down on what type of Grid we wanted it to be. So, and I know a lot of people have sort of said about the title, why is it just called Grid? Why is it not Grid 4? Why is it not Grid : something else? And it's because it is a kind of an amalgamation of everything that Grid was and also where we think it can be. That's why it's just called Grid. I'm not going to say it's the definitive Grid, because there's still value, I think, in playing the other titles. But it takes elements from each of those previous three titles, rolls them together in a coherent way, and adds a whole bunch of other secret sauce, right? And creates something unique. But it still feels Grid. It still feels like, if you've played any one of the other Grid games, this won't be alien to you. It might do some things you didn't expect, but it'll still feel like Grid. And it almost doesn't matter which one of the Grids you've played, if you've played any of them. So I think that's probably the best way of looking at it. You know, anytime I've done any press about this, that's the way, because I've had that question a number of times, that why is it just called Grid? That's why. And that was a very deliberate
Essence
and conscious
of
choice.
Grid.
It's the perfect
New fragrance.
essence. Yeah, that works for me.
I mean, I can feel a Christmas marketing campaign coming on with that, right?
Really terrible
adverts.
advert
Yes.
that bear no relation to the product.
Not
Don't
at all.
ever
It's
you
got
do.
some racing in the background, there's like a perfume in the middle. It'll be
Yeah,
perfect.
don't give me a creative job, it'd be horrific.
I think we absolutely should.
What did you think was the biggest challenge on the project? I suppose for you personally.
The essence of Grid.
The essence of Grid.
I mean, I know that's a really cheap answer, but yeah, it was. Like that initial ideation phase went on for way longer than I really thought it would. And it was fine, like we had the time to do that, but I kind of wanted to be a bit further. Like, you have that kind of personal clock that's ticking, thinking we should probably be further along. Actually, there was no real pressure from the business to be further along. We wanted to make sure we made the right decisions. But in my head, I'm thinking, God, we spent like so long kind of going over these things. But ultimately, it was because the challenge was, what Grid did we want it to be? Initially, we were thinking, oh, maybe it is Grid 4. You know, in fact, for a long time, it was called Grid 4. Because we were like, right, we're going to do a sequel to Autosport. And then we were like, do we really want to make a sequel to Autosport? Because as good as Autosport is, it also misses out on some of the things that the original Grid did, some of the flair and the kind of the more sort of extravagant racing and the broad palette of stuff. So we thought, okay, well, maybe that. Well, there's some really nice stuff in Grid 2 as well. And you're like, oh, yeah, well, maybe this is Grid 3 then. And like just identifying which bits of the series to take and which bits to leave on the cutting room floor, and then what you can add to that. Like, that's the challenge, really. Certainly from a personal standpoint, because I was directly involved in that. Yeah, that took longer than I thought it would have taken, but ultimately it took the right amount of time, if that makes sense.
It's a good point on development, actually, that sometimes in Codemasters you're very much making the game and you've got the title and that's the game you're making. And that does happen here. But as Simon's just described, it's not always the case.
No.
Sometimes the title is born of actually what happens in the creativity of the game, and that is continuing in the business as we speak. And that's really exciting because we can do either, right? You know, obviously we're not going to change the name of Formula One anytime soon, but there are other areas, you know, in Codemasters where titles come afterwards, and I just love that.
Yeah.
That's another example, actually, of the variety within a racing
Well, that's
genre.
happening on the project we're making at the Cheshire
Yes,
Studio
yeah.
now. That's exactly where that's come from. That is a title that was born out of, where can this go now? What can we do with this idea? Grid was the same, right? Grid had we knew we wanted to make a Grid game. We didn't know what Grid game we wanted to make, and that's what we had to explore. That's kind of where we're at now with this new project. We know we want to make X game. What is the flavour of that? What does it look like? What's the shape of it? And that's what we know exactly what that is now, because it's sort of getting into it because of where we are in development.
Yeah, in the process.
But those first few months
At the
of it,
beginning, that's
it's
really,
like, well,
yeah.
it's a bunch of these different ideas.
It was really exciting, actually. You asked me earlier about what makes it great to work here and being involved at that stage, because when they do concept stage here, they really do. It's kind of right.
Yeah.
Guys and gals, here's your piece of paper, and you know, so it's
very
very,
collaborative.
very creative at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, you can feel it actually in the studios. You can definitely feel it. There's just a buzz about the place, and then it unfolds. And anyone working in the games industry knows then, you know, how that sort of goes down the track of production. But yeah, that early phase, being involved in that was very exciting.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice to be involved. Like the last 2 titles I've worked on, I've kind of been involved in that process, which has been just it's glorious as a designer, because you're just like, what can it be? Let's just
yeah, absolutely.
It can be anything. I know that's dangerous.
Oh yeah, the worst thing you can give to a creative person is a blank sheet of paper.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like it's just terrible. You're like, So yeah.
Favourite feature of the game? Is it the Nemesis system?
It probably is actually. Like I'm a bit of a car nerd. Actually, I'm a lot of a car nerd. But
That
so
helps
there's
working at Codemasters,
it helps,
I can
yeah,
imagine.
for sure. So there's certain cars in the game that I have a real fondness for. So it's not necessarily favourite feature or favourite moment, but there's just some cars in the game that I was really pleased we were able to get over the line in terms of licensing and actually getting them in. So that's a good thing. But I think, yeah, in terms of features, it's probably the Nemesis system. I've always enjoyed racing. I've not always enjoyed driving. Like, I enjoy driving in real life, but driving in games is not always the most exciting thing. But racing, and not many games capture that feeling of real racing. And having done a little bit of amateur racing myself, it's like, you don't really, the night and day a lot of the time. But I feel like we've kind of caught, not necessarily lightning in a bottle, but we've kind of caught the essence of really what real racing feels like when you're out on a track. It's obviously, through a means of a TV and a joypad rather than like in a full race car, but it does feel like that, and I think the Nemesis system is a real part of that. So definitely the on-track experience is just glorious.
Excellent. Have you played it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Are you excited?
Have you got your copy?
I have got my copy.
Great.
Yeah.
No excuse then, Meg.
No, I know.
Get online. Get on those leaderboards.
Do you have like internal leaderboards?
Oh, we have a racing. Every studio has a couple of racing seats actually.
I can imagine.
Yeah, the one at the Cheshire studio, we have a pin board next to it, so we'll do different challenges like super lap challenges.
We did one on the other week for one special day for special
Yeah, which is on
effects.
Formula One.
Yeah, and all 3 studios took part, and we raised a bunch of money for that. But yeah, any excuse to get to get a track challenge.
Good bit of competition.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to make the most of it as well when you're making all these racing games as well, surely.
Totally.
It's a perfect opportunity to get competitive.
Oh yeah, it particularly when like the charity one was great because I think it was £1 a lap or £2 a lap. I can't remember the exact price. But then you get people coming up just dropping 20 quid in the bucket and going, right, I'm here for the next 30 minutes. Like I'm just going to dial in the best lap. It was brilliant. We had some of the staff putting their car keys in the bucket. You're like, you can't do that. I know you want to win, but that's not the way this works.
Are you sure that was about the lap challenge? No.
That was a different bucket. Wait a second, did I misread this situation?
Yeah. We set up the play seat in Develop as well this year. We went to Develop and had a stand, and that was good. People then kind of wanted to come and work for us. Now that I've played your game, can I come and work for you?
I think I walked past your stand
okay.
I think I saw it. I was only at Develop not for long the morning after because I was running the Game Dev Hero Awards.
Right.
So I was only in for a little bit next morning, so I had a quick look around and I was like, I want to go on that. No. So I need to go to work.
We'll be there next year. It's fine.
Yes, definitely. I'll definitely find some time to do it this year. I'm going to be there longer, I think. Yes, you guys won an award at Gamescom.
We did
as well. How did that feel?
Oh, that's amazing, isn't it? Really, like, and kind of unexpected, but also not surprising. If like we feel like it was deserved, but we weren't sure that people would see it in that light. But obviously, yeah, I mean, that was a great accolade. Yeah, really pleased. As soon as that news rippled through, I think I was away somewhere else on business at the time when I got the message. I was doing a press trip. I was over in the States doing a press trip. So I didn't know anything about this, and I just got like the messages came through. Like a couple of people texted me. Actually, a couple of people that didn't work at the studio texted me going, "Congratulations!" I'm like, "What for? Like, why are you texting me?
Who are you?
Who are you? Yeah, who is this person? Like, did I get remarried? Like, what happened?
What happened in Vegas?
That's right. Yeah, I've only been here 24 hours. It was an amazing feeling. And the news just kind of ripples through. Everybody's like, "Oh, can't believe we won the awards." Yeah, it's a great feeling, definitely.
No, it must have been so cool. Cause I was at Gamescom, so I had a look around.
Oh, brilliant.
Saw all the other games and stuff there. So going up against like the other big racing games that were there.
Need for Speed was there as well, which was
it
like
was.
That's a feather in our cap.
Yeah.
I'm quite pleased about that. No disrespect to the Need for Speed devs, but like I'm really pleased that we were able to achieve that. Yeah,
No,
great for the team.
Excellent. Cool. Right, so I think those are all my questions about Grid, unless there's anything specifically you wanted to cover about it.
Other than just plugging it,
Yeah.
it's out there now. Go buy it. Try it for yourself.
Come on, do it properly.
Oh god, it's available now on PC, Xbox, and PS4.
Excellent.
And you can still get Grid Autosport on Switch as well.
There you go, sorted. We all know there's no one way to get into the games industry. There's no perfect formula to follow, unfortunately, then life would be a lot easier. So I'm going to ask both of you again, how did you get into the games industry?
I'm a recruiter, really, and I used to recruit for, finance. I used to recruit for IT, and then joined Amicus, 2005, and obviously then started recruiting for the games industry. So I've been in it since then. So for me, it was kind of a sideways move. But then I think the thing about the games industry is once you experience it, even just from the outsider as a supplier from the periphery, it's like addictive because everyone's just so cool, right? It's just everyone's got their own reasons and passions, and it's just so refreshing. It's just the opposite of wearing a suit and sitting on the tube. It's the opposite of that, and I think that's why people love it. From my point of view, I was just very lucky to stumble upon it, but now that I'm here, I absolutely want to stay, so I wouldn't at all blame anyone for wanting to get into the industry. So that was my trick in, I guess.
I fell into it really as well. I did a degree in sound technology, so I was going to be a record producer. That was my dream. I was a musician for a number of years. I was doing remixes and making my own kind of EDM stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be the future for me. And then I realised, it's really hard to get a job in the music industry. What do I do? And I didn't really fancy it. A couple of my friends went and did like live sound with bands on tour and stuff, and that's like a great life for them. Wasn't right for me at the time. I didn't really want to go spend my whole life travelling around out of a van. So I was like, I need a studio job. And it was actually my dad suggested to me, he was like, you used to play video games, didn't you? And I was like, yeah. Don't they have musicians in the video game industry? Yeah, I think they probably do. So he's like, well, why don't you apply then? So I applied to a few places, and one of the places that picked up my CV was Codemasters. And they got back to me and said, we really like your music, but we don't have any musician vacancies at the moment. Do you have any level design skills? So I was like, well, no. But I didn't say that. I went away and I grabbed, I think, the original Half-Life it would have been. Maybe it wouldn't have even been that. It might have even been Doom. I can't remember. But I grabbed whatever first-person shooter had like a level editor. I'd done a few Doom maps, I know for a fact. I think Half-Life might have just come out. I basically spent an entire weekend just building levels and just getting my head around like editing. I wrote back and said, yeah, I've got some level design skills. Came down for the interview. They taught me how to use the level editor for like an hour and then just tasked me with building a track and gave me like 2 hours to build a track. And because I knew cars and I knew racing, just as a hobby, I was like, okay, I can put these 48 hours of crunched like level design skills with my already pre-existing knowledge of like how cars work and how tracks work and try and smash them together. And it worked. I got a job as a level designer. And then realised that actually I'm quite a good designer. This is something I probably should have considered earlier. And that's been it since then, really. I've been a designer for 20 years now.
There's a little lesson in there for any of you youngsters wanting to get into the industry. That level of proactivity there, doing your own projects in your own time. Yeah. You can't just turn up at uni, do your coursework, and then go home and forget about it. You've really got to live and breathe it and want to be in it. And that level of self-improvement and curiosity that then turns into action, that's absolutely key. And that's what we look for in our recruits, as we touched on earlier. But it is also how people coming out of uni can go into the games industry, but raise their sort of heads above everybody else, make themselves stand out. You have to come with your own stuff. You have to come with your own energy and some demonstration of what you can do. Because when you're a grad, it's hard to evidence, like, what can you do, so we have to see some of that. So working on their own portfolios, that type of thing.
Even if it's like tangentially related. Like, I've employed people in design in the past that have not got any necessarily formal design skills, but can say, I've been running D&D campaigns for the last 5 years, I can show you some of that stuff. I'm like, great. Like, I'm a GM myself. I know how hard it is and how organised you have to be and the level of creativity. That shows me you think like a designer then, because you kind of need the same skills. Yeah. So any of that stuff is golden. Like, it doesn't necessarily be I designed this game. It can be something else. Like, I wrote this short story, or I wrote this comic book, or I designed this board game, or whatever. They're all valid.
No, completely true. I think that especially like game creation programs have never been more accessible.
Oh gosh,
I think anybody can go out there and have a crack at it. I mean, whether you're good at it or not is another question. But there is a lot of stuff out there for you to be able to have a go.
Just
even
explore,
inbuilt story modes on games and things like that. You can build pretty much anything now. It's amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's very, very cool. Right, okay, so last question. What does the future look like for Codemasters?
I think we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. I mean, it's really positive. Genuinely, I've been at the company like 3 years now, and it's been progressive growth every year, like year on year. Not just in terms of like financially, which is obviously one measure of success, but also just in terms of the ambition of the studios. And as I mentioned earlier, one thing that Frank wants to try and do is increase the budget of each title as we go forward, because we are making bigger bets every time, right? And that shows a level of confidence, and it shows a level of commitment, and it suggests that the business are willing to invest. They're willing to want to go into new markets, into new territories, into new technologies. I don't know exactly where the business is going to go, But that's kind of exciting in its own right. You know, there's a lot of options for us. There's a lot of ways we can go. I think one of the advantages of being independent means we can kind of pick and choose really where we go. We're not forced to adhere to any sort of technological architecture. You know, I've worked for first party before. I spent a long time at PlayStation and I really enjoyed my time there. But oftentimes you were supporting the hardware. There was always an initiative of, this is the new PlayStation, this is the Vita, this is the PlayStation VR, and there is a requirement from the studios to support that. Whereas here, we can kind of look at everybody's technology. What are all the options available to us? What do we want to support? What works best for us as a business? That's really exciting, and that flexibility.
Yeah, I think, as you say, we actually don't know what the future looks like, but that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Because
I'm sure Frank does. He probably has a much better idea than we do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, we've got probably a pretty good view, I think, of the next 2 to 3 years,
easy,
to be fair, when
yeah.
you're working here. Yeah, you do. But what I mean is, who knew 10 years ago what it was going to be like today, and then 10 years on? It's not really predictable because
Unless you're Jeff Bezos. Who seems to be the only man that's 10 years ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, we ride the wave of technology and platform agnostic, I think is kind of the phrase that Frank uses. But the ingredients and the investment that Simon mentions there's been a huge investment. Well, in a number of ways actually, but certainly in new staff that I've seen. So we've made some very key hires over the past 12 months who are individuals who are inspirational to even speak to, if I'm dead honest. I won't mention the names because they'll get big-headed. They genuinely
You're just fascinated by Dan's beard, aren't you?
It's all about Dan's beard.
Dan's beard.
It's just, these are people who push, they're visionary in what they do. Some of them, Dan's a programmer, some are programmers, some are game directors, some are production people, some are in live operations and live service, some are in other parts of technology that support our business because we've got all our own in-house stuff. And it's absolutely inspirational, some of the people who walk in the door, and I think that the future is just tremendously exciting because it's not going to be limited other than what they can do in the hours you've got in a day, frankly. You know, we take the lid off the sort of imagination and keep working with the people and the technology that we've got and just keep pushing.
That's excellent. Those are all my questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aardvark. No, I appreciate it, and well done on a great initiative with the Search for a Start. I think it's been a focal point for graduates in the industry for a long time, and I think that can only be a good thing. If you're encouraging people to get competitive and get their name out there, why not?
I think getting those extra things added to their CV as well, like you were saying.
Of course,
people
it is.
coming into the industry, so they've done a little bit of extra something on the side.
Yeah, and a trusted supplier as well in the industry. It's not an easy space to deliver into, and I wouldn't disrespect anybody choosing to deliver into the games market because it's not easy. So no, thanks for the opportunity.
Cool, no problem at all. Thanks for chatting to me.
Thank you for listening to the Aardvark Swift podcast. This episode was recorded on site at Codemasters, was hosted by Abby Dickinson, and was edited and produced by me, James Bowers. If you have any questions or suggestions for the podcast, or if you'd like to feature on an upcoming episode, please email me at james.b@aswift.com. That's james.b@aswift.com. If you're looking to break into video games or make a transition to a new role, visit the Aardvark Swift website at aswift.com. We have hundreds of industry vacancies both at home and abroad. Be sure to follow us across social media for the latest vacancies and news, on Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook at Aardvark Swift. We also have a behind the scenes Instagram account at Life at Aardvark. The music in this episode is from Incompetech by Kevin MacLeod. To learn more, you can visit incompetech.com. Once again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you all again next month.